Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for your time. We have quite a rich agenda. I- just a couple of words about Europark. I guess you are familiar with the network and the organization, but just in case you're not, Europark is the organization for protected areas across all over Europe in a geographical sense, with more than 400 members in 4 countries, and most of which are protected areas per se, but also many national authorities, like ministries, national agencies, regional authorities with responsibility for protected areas. And we do a lot of things within Europark, but among the many, we are trying to build knowledge and raise the capacity of our managers and authorities across Europe and support them with experience and capacity. So that's why at the moment we're working together to develop learning material to support the development of the restoration plans and also to look into the restoration implementation in future. So that's why this event today. And with this, we really would like to collect ideas, experiences, and knowledge on starting from the context, the policy context, going into tools for planning, and collect from your experience challenges, opportunities, lessons learned while developing the plans. So while today we'll be focused on the planning, tomorrow morning we'll focus on implementation. Thanks a lot for that. And here our speakers for this afternoon. So we'll start with Sofie Ruysschaert, who's the Senior Nature Restoration Policy Officer at BirdLife Europe and State of Latvia. And she's been following a lot the development of the policy in Brussels. She will give us an overview. Thanks, Sofie. And then we'll have 2 interventions from national perspectives. Laura Anteina, who's the Director General for Nature Conservation Agency in Latvia, and she's here with us. And Raimondas Čiuplys, who's Counselor in the State Service for Protected Areas in Lithuania. Thank you for being with us, and he's here with us. And then we'll explore some tools for nature restoration from Louise O Connor, who's joining online, and she's working for a large Tourism Europe NaturaConnect project, and she will share some of the tools developed through the project. And then we'll have space for questions. So ask your questions on the Q&A space and some discussion. Thank you. So that's all from our side. And I give you, Sofie, the floor, and you can share your presentation.
Yes, thanks, Fernando. Let me share my screen. Good afternoon.
Meanwhile, if you're from the audience, you cannot hear our voices loud enough, we cannot make the microphone louder because we're using one microphone for the whole room. So please try to move your volume up.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah. Can you?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Very good. So first of all, nice to see you here. I wish you all a good afternoon, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to kickstart the session looking at the policy side in relation to nature restoration, looking back, but especially also looking forward. So slide. So just as a kind of reminder for you, several of you may know this graph or some variation on this graph, which illustrates the different change enablers. This is also very valid for nature restoration, of course. And you see here centrally to the different elements of enabling change, that's governance and policy, which are often named in the same way, are a key aspects of the different elements to make change for nature restoration. And why is this policy element so important? And of course, we can start with zooming out, look at the global level as a reminder for you. You probably all know the Global Biodiversity Framework, which has a very important second target to restore at least 30% of all degraded ecosystems by 2030. And you also probably all know the ongoing United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, where we are now over halfway. And this decade of nature restoration has also an important goal to ramp up restoration through building political momentum. So that's where policy comes in also for restoration, and also then in addition to a broad range of different nature restoration activities and initiatives on the ground across Europe and beyond at the global level. And of course, at European level, we have a key opportunity for policy with the adoption of the Nature Restoration Law back in June in 2024. And this has, of course, also a very important overall goals to put nature restoration measures in place that should cover at least 20% of Europe's land and sea. And by 2050, nature restoration measures should be put in place for all ecosystems in need of restoration. And these are very important objectives to really scale up nature restoration across Europe, and to really reverse the declining biodiversity trends and really bring back nature through Europe, through the different nature restoration targets in this European Nature Restoration Law, which cover a wide range of ecosystems, as you know, going from urban ecosystems over river systems to agricultural ecosystems and forests, each with their own obligations, targets, and indicators. And this nature restoration law is very important also for all the work you're doing on protected areas. You could say that the nature restoration law and protected areas are mutually supporting each other. And why? Because of course the Birds and the Habitats Directive are the backbone for the European Nature Restoration Law. So Nature Restoration Law is fully built on the Birds and Habitats Directive, and in the wide sense, but then specifically also on Natura 2000, because the final version of the law clearly states that member states should give priority to nature restoration in Natura 2000 sites until 2030. And in addition to that, member states should take into account the already existing or the at least planned conservation measures in this Natura 2000 areas for the development and the implementation of the nature restoration plans. And in that context, protected areas can give and should provide a very important contribution to achieve the restoration targets. And this can happen in several ways. And one of the potential ways is also because in many countries, protected areas are probably one of the best studied parts of a country, parts of Europe, where there's a lot of data available about the state of art of nature and the needs for nature restoration. So this can already be very informative to know where nature restoration priorities are in the country, going from the south to the north or the west to the east. And another aspect is that restored areas can become protected areas as a long-term safeguard, because as you know, nature restoration often takes some time. So there need to be some safeguards in place so nature is getting the time to fully recover, to fully achieve the nature restoration goals that have been put in place for a certain area or for a certain species. So there need to be some long-term safeguards to make this possible, to facilitate this. And this could be in the form of a protected area, for example. So all the different elements are important, I think, for you to consider because I think it's relevant for your work throughout the process of the implementation of the European Nature Restoration Law. And center to the implementation, so you could say the backbone of implementation of the European Nature Restoration Law is, of course, the national nature restoration plans. Countries have now until the 1st of September to submit a first draft of the plan. And these national plans have a number of very important building blocks to ensure that they are a strong plan. They really contribute to the effective implementation of this new European legislation on the ground. And here on the slide, I present a number of these important building blocks. Let's start with the science base, of course, because the nature restoration plan needs to highlight areas and measures based on sorry based on where the most needs are to make a difference for nature restoration on the ground. So the science base is very, very key on that. Another important aspect of that is the cross-society cooperation, the cross-society engagement of developing the plans, because nature restoration will happen in places probably where several land uses are actually happening. So there needs to be full engagement of landowners, for example, land managers, for example, other ways of using land, other ways of other actors that need to be involved to actually put effective nature restoration on the ground. And this is also then linked to the aspect of synergies and policy coherence, because a lot of policies, of course, directly or indirectly interact with the implementation and development of the plans, which are also relevant for your work in protected areas, for example. And another final element I would like to highlight is the funding aspect, of course, because financing and funding has been one of the key topics that was discussed since the adoption or even since the proposal of the European Nature Restoration Law. An important part of the plan will need to pay attention to this funding element. So member states need to make clear what are the needs for nature restoration, to be able to be transparent about the type of budget that is needed to implement the plan and to implement the nature restoration law. And this financing aspect could look both at public funding or private funding. So this is important also to make the plans feasible, of course. And this is also important information source to be able to know where the gaps are, and also to know where then extra effort needs to be put in place to attract sufficient funding for implementation of the nature restoration plans and the implementation of the nature restoration law. And then finally, of course, aspects around communication and public engagement and capacity building also need to feature in the national nature restoration plans, because this helps to get buy-in, to get public support, for example, stakeholder support for the plans, to increase the visibility of implementation of the plans. And here a bit more as an illustration on the aspect of policy coherence, because it is also very important. I already mentioned the link between national nature restoration plans and Natura 2000 and the conservation measures, but there are much more policies which directly or indirectly interact, and which should receive attention in the plans, and which are also relevant for the ongoing work on protected areas. For example, plans related to national adaptation strategies and action plans for climate, because often there climate resilience and climate adaptation is featured, and as nature is being seen more and more as an important solution to deal with climate adaptation and to increase climate resilience, it makes sense that these plans are also thoughtfully are included, or at least linked to the development of this new national nature restoration plans. Another example is, of course, anything related to the common agricultural policy, which has now also a number of environmental objectives. So, and as I mentioned already before, the national nature restoration plans needs to explain how the targets, for example, for agriculture ecosystems will need to be put in place. And then, of course, this links up with the proper implementation of the common agriculture policy and the national plans related to that. And also as a kind of reminder, I mentioned it already before, we are slowly getting closer to the deadline of the first submission of the draft plans, which is due in September this year, September 2026. There's only a few months to go for a country to submit the first draft of the plan. And after that, the Commission will have 6 months to have a careful look to the plans, to formulate some observations, to improve the plans in line with the legal obligations of the law. So I think this is also an important period where we as NGOs, but also other sectors, also, for example, protected areas authorities can also contribute to improvement the plan, to get stronger plans in their final version when they need to be submitted in next year by September 2027. And just for your information, if you're wondering how a strong nature restoration plan look like, then I would advise you to this guidance document with a number of recommendations about ambitious nature restoration plans. That was published by our core group of NGOs working on nature restoration last year. And it has a lot of valuable information to explain the different aspects of the nature restoration law and how they could be translated in practice with a number of good examples in the national plan to make it work from the start. And based on this recommendations report, we have started work last year to have a look at the progress of the national nature restoration plans and how we can, we as NGOs and together with other actors, how we can provide a positive contribution further to the development of the plans. And for this contribution, for this progress evaluation, we looked into 5 key topics. You can see them here on the slides. The first one is a science base, for example, or mainly the use of best available knowledge and data, which is a requirement that the law sets for the national nature restoration plans. Then we look to the vision and the scope, so to the ambition of the plan, how the country foresees this ambition in the national nature restoration plan. The third element we looked into in the inclusivity, because the plans, according to the law, needs to happen, development of the plans needs to happen in a participative, transparent and open way. So we look to the level of participation throughout the development process of the plans and the level of transparency, the way stakeholders are involved throughout the different steps of the plan. And finally, we have been deep diving on the element of empowerment. And this is also a very important point because we looked into the building of political buy-in, the building of public participation, public engagement, and the coordination, how this is happening in the development of the plan. And of course, also to increase visibility, the level of resources that are available or that are needed to implement the plan. And that's where also the funding element, which I mentioned before, is included. And this midterm assessment, we have been publishing, we have published that in December last year. You can find it on the website. I think the link can be shared. It's shared on the slides and we can share it in the chat later. This is interesting also for your work because this midterm assessment looked at the different challenges and enablers and opportunities and capacity needs linked to these different aspects, these 4 different elements of development of the plans. So this is a very useful element, is a very useful exercise to see how we can further support the development of the plans and how we can make it into stronger plans by the deadline.
Sophie, you have 1 more minute, please.
Yeah, very good. Then I just wanted to hear as a visualization of how we approached this midterm assessment. You see here that back at the midterm, so back at December last year, only a number of countries were progressing well, but most of the work needed to really kickstart at the time of the year. But luckily, so far, of what we have been hearing from our partners involved in the different development of the plans for the policy side, we see that progress has been improving, and we see that we are in a good way towards the submission of the plans by the deadline. So we will also continue this work from the NGO sides with our allies to further support the work and to further ensure that we will have strong plans by the deadline this year. And I want to finalize my couple of slides with a number of key recommendations that have become very clear from the midterm assessment of the plans and from the follow-up work that we are doing now with the partners. We see that there's a strong need. There's still a strong need to strengthen the public support for nature restoration, the nature restoration law, and especially the need to increase the political buy-in, to improve the buy-in for nature restoration. And this is especially relevant in the current context where you may have seen that there is a clear trend for environmental deregulation, for to simplify environmental laws that are currently existing, and this risks to undermine the commitments, the European commitments that we have for biodiversity and nature and climate. So it's very important to remind everyone involved about this positive narrative for nature restoration, to really say how important it is to highlight these benefits, the multiple benefits of nature restoration, to increase the buy-in, and then in parallel to accelerate also the preparation also the national restoration plans, and to increase also the funding and the capacity, as this is an ongoing concern, of course, throughout the process. And another aspect remains the science base, so the scientific rigor and the ambition of the plans, which needs to be improved. So the nature restoration plan is really in line with the needs, the scientific needs for nature restoration. And then finally, the way that the process is happening now, it could be improved by opening it up and empowering the different people involved and different actors involved to really ensure this buy-in, this engagement to strengthen the baseline of the plans to make it happen in the current political and policy context. And I think this was it. Yes, voila. Thank you. Still in time, I hope.
Thank you, Sofie. Just on time. In fact, I would like to remind everyone to use the question and answers feature of Zoom. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and we'll try to answer them at the end. But please use it and ask your questions there. And just following on what Sofie said, I've seen some reactions here in the room, and so hopefully through the next two presentations, Sofie, you'll get some interesting updates for your map, because I think there's some colors to be changed and to be improved in the level of engagement and commitment of work delivered already by some countries. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Laura Anteina from the Nature Conservation Agency of Latvia. Share the screen.
1 second, please, while we share the screen. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you very much for introduction, and also for having the possibility to speak at this event, and also to be in this very beautiful place in Siggen. in northern Germany. We already did some reflection and quite big discussions in the morning session, just between us, ourselves in our small group. But now I'd like to share more about Latvia's experience and where we are now standing in the elaboration and development of our national nature restoration plan. To give you more shortly definition who we are, I just want to show you the main areas of activity or responsibility of our institution. We are the main policy implementation institution in Latvia regarding the nature conservation policy, and our job is to ensure the implementation in a unified way. And that includes also different areas of expertise and work we are doing our jobs. And of course, this includes the management of specially protected nature territories, also protection of species and habitats we need to ensure, and also provide other different activities, also like management activities of those sites, and nature education and public engagement. And of course, it means also the straight property management, because we are the main body acting in the name of the state regarding the preservation of those specially protected nature territories. Here you have the map of our situation in Latvia and the different status of those specially protected territories. In total, there are about 800 different specially protected nature territories, which are certified, so they're officially protected by the law or different regulations set out by our national legislation. And as you can see, the map is very wide and different, but I would like to mention that those restrictions are also in different ways. They're restricted. So basically not all the regulations are unifiedly binding for those territories. So that means that different activities can be held on and provided in those territories, but some of them are very, very strict. Like, for example, strict nature reserves mean that there are very few activities which can be done in those territories, but that does not apply for all the others. So basically, when it comes to the nature conservation processes, we need to have that in mind, that there are needs and different designation points for which those territories were set in the beginning. Yes, please. And of course, for the planning and to be more efficient and also the data-driven, and so you need to have a base for data and also expertise. So what is we have done before, and I would like to share more during my presentation, is how we actually reach to the point now, and how the data and what we are doing with the data in order to make our also the policy planning process more efficient. And so one of the biggest projects to get all the data and also to have information about all our territories, especially Natura 2000 territories. We had a very huge project called the Nature Census. So basically it took place from 2016 to 2022. And during that project, we got information about EU having a distribution and also the quality in order to how we've done with the management of Natura 2000 territories and what should we do to improve it in future. And after that, of course, there were several projects now are still going on with the help and the support from the LIFE program in order to provide the necessary like quality measures. For example, One of the projects, which is called the Life IP Life in Nature project, which is for a 10-year period and still will be until 2029, which actually focuses on setting conservation objectives for the habitats, directed species and habitats at the state level and for each of our Natura 2000 territories. Also, it focuses on implementation of invasive species regulation and the development of voluntary result-based schemes for habitat management and conservation. And I would also really like to put the point of view that there should be private involvement also when it comes to the nature conservation. It shouldn't just be the state owned business, as I would put that way. Yes, and of course, what we have also done is that we've now revised our information about different species, and what we have done specifically both those protected and distinctive species, and we have just now published our new red data book after more than 20 years from the last one. So basically it's very, very new and contains all the data now we have about our distinctive and protected species right now. Also, in the parallel, I'd like to mention that we also have one project focused on research on marine habitats specifically. So basically, there has been a large scientific work done on regarding the status of marine ecosystems in order to develop one management plan for all the protected marine areas, and also to revise the Natura 2000 network regarding the marine habitats. So basically, all of this is the knowledge base we need to take into account in order to make our management priorities and also nature conservation priorities in action. And of course, we are following also the prioritized action framework for Natura 2000 in Latvia, which is set for the period from 2021 to 2027, and includes some of the most important tasks, as the site designation and management planning for Natura 2000 territories, and also which puts the research and closing knowledge gaps. So basically, those projects I mentioned before are focused in order to reach and get those stuff done, what we were doing before. When it comes to the current situation, we have a lot of produced management plans for our Natura 2000 territories. So basically, you can say that about 50% of all Natura 2000 sites in Latvia have now management plans, and that means that currently the total amount is 114 management plans for Natura 2000 sites, and under development there are more, 24, which will finish in a couple of years. What I'd like also to say that not all of those sites really need specific management plans, because there are, activities which can be introduced and set for the same on the national level. So you don't need specific one for every territory. And yes, but what we need to understand, sometimes we also need some modeling perspective, which is why we are very focusing on our spatial database, which contains all the information I was mentioning before. And we are using that as also the mapping tool for prioritizing and making those management solutions and practices we are including our plans for the future. And also what I didn't mention before, that there also were some over the last 5-7 years, more than 50 more new nature conservation plans were developed. So basically, this is also what we are working on very, very slightly. We still do that despite of all other activities, and we will do that in future as well. What I would like to mention is that regarding the data, what we can do in future and focusing more is about using different scientific approaches and modeling perspectives in order to use less on-site monitoring activities. If you are having the good modeling system implemented, then we need less information like gathered all the time. So that is what we are focusing now, and we are on the national level giving also the state budget for the research purposes regarding that. And I hope that soon we'll have the model ready and we can, improve also this model and use it in improving maps for the green corridors and biodiversity hotspots. That is what we're working as well now. And here I'd like also to mention, yes, that of course we are not just planning it; we are also working on specific reviews and data gatherings and planning processes in our projects now already go under the implementation right now. Slide. What I can say also is that now we have all the necessary also habitat data available. That is why I think it's very important to state that in order to have a good and a planning process, you need in the beginning to have all the data necessary for it. And if you don't have it, so you need to either model or project that data in order to use it in the best possible way. But what I need to mention is that sometimes, this is very challenging because if we do have them, for example, data on habitats, which, for example, are located on the private land. There is also this discussion on a very challenging situation. How can we deal with the landowner in order to reach those nature protection and conservation goals in those lands? Because not everybody is willing to support these activities, and there should be a strong compensation mechanism involved in order for people to really want to join this system. Yes, and here I see that, some modeling. I just wanted to show you how it looks like. Next slide, please. How it looks like, what we are having actually now. And here is the geospatial data about our, this example is about management prioritization into two sections. So basically, one is the larger scale and the other is smaller scale, and zoomed in scale about our Natura 2000 territories. Every single territory has its borders. And we have, this priority. So basically, the red show the high priority places, yellow or brown the medium, and green low priority places. So basically, which the most important habitats and species are in those territories, there are the green ones here. The next one, please. And here the example is about the protection priorities. So basically this is also where it should be prioritized to ensure the protection of the natural values. So basically also we have this map already here. It just means that we need to make a political decision in order to use this data in the future, and take it into account when it comes to political decision making and development of other development projects, for example, like windmill and wind energy, those development activities, which are now very, very high level topic now in our country. following. And here I just wanted to update about the situation that is not so bad regarding the elaboration of our national nature restoration plan. And so basically, officially it started, the process started last year in December, when the working group was established, containing all the necessary parties with different perspectives. Just that's the more important thing to mention is that we need to actually state and decide what are the roles of those parties involved, and what is actually the process, and how do we reach the agreement, because there are different perspectives, and sometimes they can be completely on a different scale and different understanding of the priorities that should be put in. And yes, that is what we are going on now. So basically, the process is that every sector presents their proposals and ideas, and also the gathering information about the ongoing and planned projects. This means that we are looking at the activities which already we have funding planned before, because of course, as the priorities of the state budget are now different. They're mainly regarding the defense purposes, the military purposes, and also social benefits and education. So basically, we need to find those financing, which already mainly provided by the European Union, and now go through the cohesion funding. Basically, that is main our source of for financing for agriculture conservation purposes. And yes, here are just some what we are planning to do, and political decision. Yeah, that should be very difficult to reach. Maybe the next slide, because now we have parliamentary elections this year in October coming up. So this level of political uncertainty, it's kind of hard to reach one common agreement. So yes, a unpredictable political situation will have its own impact, and it's already having right now, as this campaigning has already started the political parties. And what I also want to mention is that of course, we don't know what is going to happen with the EU funding for the next period. If we look for the activities after 2030. So basically, if we need to share our still small stuff with also the common agricultural policy, it should be one of the most challenging points in order to reach the agreement and to have funding for nature restoration and conservation purposes. Yes, very sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for your rich presentation, for the background information and the updates on the current development of the nature restoration funds. Clearly, political uncertainty and funding comes up in the discussion. And please, just a reminder for our colleagues online, use the chat, the question and answer option to raise your questions, and you can also vote to select the best questions that might be already existing. And also, don't forget to use the Canva. You have the link on the chat in the beginning of the chat, and use it to share knowledge, experience, tools you might know, or installation you might have. With this, I'm happy to give the floor to Raimondas Čiuplys, who share this presentation.
You can try to stop and share again. Raimondas, if you don't mind, can you try to speak up a bit loud so the participants can hear? Yeah, thank you. Just 1 second. It's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I want to present a short snapshot of national restoration plan development for Lithuania. The situation in Latvia and Lithuania is very similar, I think. And what Laura has presented, much of it suits to Lithuania as well. Maybe there are some differences. As Laura mentioned, we have to have good data to prepare good management plans. Luckily, we had prepared reports for European Commission for habitats directive and first directive, and the data show that the situation of nature protection in Lithuania is not very good. Can you present box? We have 53 types of terrestrial and freshwater habitats in Lithuania. Also, approximately 18 types of marine habitats that fell under Annex 2 of nature restoration regulation. The situation is can you go next slide, please? The data analysis showed that only 4 habitat types have favorable conservation status, and comparing to earlier period from 2013 and 2018, there were 12 types of favorable conservation state. And this estimation is based on different analyses, and the main reasons for worse situation of habitat condition is that not always real disease of habitat conservation condition. No, for the previous period, there many habitat types have been estimated according to best expert judgment. And when the data was collected, more data was collected, the new data showed that early estimations were somewhat optimistic, and real situation is a bit worse or much worse in some cases than it was estimated for the period of 2013 and 2018. So we have only 4 types with favorable status now. And among the rest habitat types, 32 habitat types have that conservation status. Also increase of this category comparing to previous period. Then another factor is that condition of habitats is mostly known from Natura 2000 sites, where detailed analysis has been performed, and the 54% of habitat area has known condition. Yes, and we also tried to you prepared reports on species status, and the analysis showed that also the condition of species also is worsening, and despite the measures provided in Natura 2000 sites, we have no good management plans for outside Natura 2000 sites, and this very it is represented in general condition of species and please. Now, while developing nature restoration plan, national nature restoration plan, we are preparing measures for that can be passive, such like development of legislation, transformation of agricultural policies, communication to stakeholders, but also active measures like our usual nature management practices, like grazing, identification of invasive species, planting of trees, bog revetment plants, and so on. And another area that is a bit weak in Lithuania, it's monitoring and reporting. There is no unified monitoring system for nature management activities, and the data collected is very fragmented and scattered. Now we are trying to improve the situation to collect all the data that is available from local stakeholders like protected area administrations, NGOs, and other interested parties. So this picture on efforts is improving, and we are planning to prepare unified monitoring system for the period when the national restoration plan will be revised in 2020. While developing national restoration plan, we are trying to fulfill requirements of nature restoration regulation or nature restoration law. These are the main areas, as Laura already mentioned, and in the previous presentation, as it was mentioned. There are nine categories. It's terrestrial and goes on water ecosystems, marine ecosystems, habitats of species. Less so is with urban ecosystems. We have plans for keeping and increasing green spaces in urban ecosystems. Also, the river connectivity and floodplains sustainability. We have already preparing plans for pollinator monitoring. It's already, we have already good progress on that, and very difficult area is agriculture and ecosystems, because to prepare good restoration plans, we have to change many strategic plans for agriculture. The similar situation is for forest ecosystem, because general forestry politics is not very favorable for forest restoration of good condition of forest habitats. Next slide, please. And maybe we will pass this. We have calculated the areas that we have to restore, that to cover by restoration methods, and we the total area is around 31,000 hectares, but it's only for known. It's part of habitat that have already assessed condition. And the more we know about habitats outside Natura 2000 habitats, the more areas for restoration will be added. So it's only starting point. Slide, please. And these steps for periods we know that we have to restore 30% by 2020, 60% by 2040, and 100% by 2050. So the more data we gather, the larger restoration needs we will get, and this puts into question if because we have to provide restoration plans that are realistic and achievable, and how to set our targets, how to set our objectives is it's becoming very difficult question. Next slide, please. Maybe yeah. We have our main steps for preparation of natural restoration plans. As it was mentioned, we have to provide a draft version of the plan by the 1st of September this year. And what we have planning in Lithuania, we have to provide the very draft plan for government assessment, and it is planned that it would be provided by by July of this year. Next slide, please. And I wanted to review our stakeholders that are participating in this process. It's most the main institution that is compiling nature restoration plan is Ministry of Environment, and there are many institutions that are also involved in this. As partners, there are Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of National Defense, and research institutions like University, Nature Research Center, certain NGOs. And the progress that I want to make forward overview that we have already put our data from habitats and works data to unified form. It's prepared to prepare. It's already prepared. The measures, the list of measures is in preparation. We have to plan our data collecting outside nature, Natura 2000 site, and prepare coherent monitoring system. And it will be challenging to put it in place by the terms that are set by the European Commission. Yes, so it's mostly yeah. I can talk much longer, but I see my time is coming around. So
thank you very much. And I'm sorry we have to cut you, but I think it's really interesting when you get into the details of how countries are seeing and implementing and working to prepare the funds, and what are the complexities on the ground, but also political level, strategic level. I think the collection of data you mentioned as a core element that emerged clean. So I'm happy now to give the floor to Louise O Connor from the Horizon Europe NaturaConnect project, and she will share some updates on tools for nature restoration planning and hopefully helpful for the work that countries are developing. Thank you, Louise. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So hi everyone, my name is Louise O Connor. I'm a research scholar based at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA in Austria. And today I'm going to talk about finding priority areas for restoration in Europe. And this is part of the work that we're doing in the NaturaConnect project, which is a large collaborative project with over 100 people involved, including a few people today in this Zoom call. So the objectives of the NaturaConnect project are to support countries in designing a trans-European nature network, which will make a difference in halting and reversing biodiversity loss. We focus primarily on 3 objectives of the EU biodiversity strategy, which are to protect at least 30% of land, with at least 10% under strict protection, and to implement ecological restoration on 20% of land under the Nature Restoration Regulation, which we'll be focusing on a bit more today. And we also look at how to maintain and restore ecological corridors to prevent genetic isolation, allow for species migration, also in the context of climate change, and maintain healthy ecosystems. So, one of the main questions we're tackling in this project is where to protect and restore ecosystems in Europe. So we want to design priorities that are comprehensive, resilient, connected, and feasible. And to do that, we consider different data that are of relevance for conservation and restoration, specifically over 1,000 distributions of species and over 200 habitats, a dozen ecosystem services, also climate change, resilience, connectivity. And then we also want our priority areas to be feasible and relevant for local decisions. And so we account for land use and land use change scenarios, opportunity costs, and area sharing, which is the notion that conservation and restoration areas should be kind of equitably shared between European countries and regions. And of course, we also consider existing protected areas as the baseline for 30% and 10% strict. And so these data have been produced across the project over the past couple of years, and we integrate them in a spatial prioritization framework to identify top priority areas in line with the EU biodiversity strategy. So identifying 30% for protected areas, 10% for strict protection, and 20% under restoration. And from this, we obtain maps like this one, which show in colours the priority areas for the different objectives. And those priority areas are designed to be climate resilient, connected, and to maximise gains for biodiversity as well as ecosystem services. Now, I just want to unpack these components one by one, just so that we're clear on what we mean by comprehensive, resilient, and connected. So to ensure that the 10N and the priorities that we design are comprehensive, we specifically focus on all species and habitats listed in the nature directives, as well as in the IUCN red lists to be known as near threatened or threatened, and any additional endemic species to Europe. And in terms of data, we use species and habitats distribution models, which allows us to get high resolution distributions data for every species and habitats. And the way that these SDM models work is that they take the occurrence records for species as well as the known conditions where the species are known to occur, to project areas where species are and where they could be also under future climate scenarios. So the advantages of that is that we have quite high resolution, fine resolution data for species and habitats, and we can also project these distributions and the potential distributions, for example, under future climate change scenarios. Now, moving on to resilience. So in the project, we're kind of explicitly accounting for climate change. And this is actually an explicitly important criteria as part of the Nature Restoration Law, which says to take into account the projected changes to environmental conditions due to climate change and prioritize the areas that are most suitable for the re-establishment of habitat types in view of ongoing projected change to, for example, climate change. And so we explicitly account for this using projected distributions for species, and that allows us to prioritize areas that will remain suitable for species under future climates. And that allows us then to map climate resilient areas for biodiversity in both current and future climatic conditions. And we use that as an input for the prioritization. Resilience is also facilitated by well-connected areas that allow species to move and track their climatic niche. So restoring connectivity across Europe is going to be really essential. And here we use Omniscape, which are omnidirectional connectivity models that can help us identify where wildlife movement is compressed or channelized into narrow corridors, or vice versa, where it is blocked. Just giving a zoom in here of the Balkan region. And so this can help us identify corridors that are under threat or that need restoration. And so then we use these connectivity model outputs as input into the spatial planning for conservation and restoration. And in this project, we also recognize that multiple values of nature benefit from conservation and restoration. So, of course, there's the intrinsic value of nature for nature, where we want to focus on species and habitats of conservation concern, for example, those listed in the nature directives and in the red lists, but also primary and old-growth forests, for example, that are recognized to have high intrinsic value for biodiversity. But of course, we also would like to have some culturally important ecosystems and species represented as well, to have some cultural benefits and also benefits for society. So preserving and restoring ecosystems that can sequester and store carbon, that can help in regulating pests for agriculture and forestry, and so on, or pollination, for example. And so ideally, we would like to capture all of these values of nature within restoration and conservation priorities. And thanks to the data that's been produced in this project, we actually can explore how these different values can impact conservation and restoration priorities. So once we have all this data on species, ecosystem services, connectivity and climate resilience, how do we actually identify priorities for restoration? Well, we use spatial conservation prioritization tools, which are a widely established tool to optimize gains for every species and habitat, also ecosystem service, within limited resources. And so for that, we use software like Zonation, MarkSan, which you might be familiar with, and PrioritizeR. So in the project, we use PrioritizeR. And this is particularly important because, as we know, space and resources for restoration action are limited. So we need to make sure that we are targeting the right places that will be most effective at halting and reversing the loss of biodiversity and ecosystems. Just to give a few examples of how these tools have been applied in the context of restoration. So actually, traditionally, spatial prioritization was kind of developed and mostly applied for conservation, but in recent years, it's been increasingly used for restoration planning. And so these studies are just a couple of examples of work of researchers that have done that. So one in particular that could be interesting for you is a paper led by Melissa Chapman that was published last year, where she integrated planning for restoration with planning for conservation in the context of European targets, also balancing land use demands for productivity. And so here in NaturaConnect, we define priorities for restoration in terms of areas that are currently degraded, but that can be restored, and that have the top 20% highest potential value for species and habitats if it were restored. So that relies on data from species, habitats, and ecosystem service potential. We also use data on land use and land use change scenarios to kind of highlight opportunities that are feasible for restoration and de-intensification. And then also we sort of account for protected areas, because we know that by 2030, much of the restoration should focus on existing protected areas, but not only, of course, when we think about the outlook for 2050. And so we integrate these data into a prioritization tool, which here we use PrioritizeR. And so this is an example output from this sort of prioritization where we can see in colors the restoration priorities, and we allow restoration to occur both within and outside existing protected areas. And so in green, we have restoration priorities outside of protected areas, and in purple, restoration priorities within existing protected areas that are degraded. And just to define a bit more specifically what I mean by defining degraded areas where restoration is feasible here, so there are kind of two components to that. The first is that we look at existing protected areas that are dominated by extractive land uses, so agriculture and forestry. And so in purple, areas like this on the map. And the other component is that we look at land use change transitions in different scenarios that will tell us the opportunities for restoration and de-intensification in different land use change scenarios. Now, of course, there's not one single approach for how we would restore ecosystems in Europe. And so we're actually creating different scenarios to explore different planning criteria. For example, in terms of to what extent should restoration area be allocated evenly between countries by geographic regions of Europe, whether or not to focus on biodiversity only or to avoid opportunity costs, which nature's values to kind of prioritize, whether to account for climate change, connectivity, and what kind of protected areas do we want to restore primarily. And so this ultimately allows us to understand the differences and the synergies and trade-offs between scenarios and different planning criteria. And then once we have all of these scenarios, we can look across them and identify areas that are always selected as top priorities. And so those are kind of safe bet areas because they are important for all of the planning criteria: connectivity, resilience, ecosystem services, species and habitats, and so on. And so this is the map that you see here is one such consensus map where, again, you have the different colours that represent whether restoration is targeted or prioritised within existing protected areas or outside. And the colour intensity, or the shade, represents the consensus across different scenarios. And just so just to take an example here in the Landes forest in France, as you may know, this is a super intensive forest with a lot of pine monoculture plantations, but it has exceptional potential value for biodiversity, and this is why this area stands out as a restoration priority. And then, as Sofie was saying earlier, actually, conservation and restoration are not mutually exclusive, and in some cases you might want to protect restored areas to have some long-term safeguard on the restored ecosystem. And so this is kind of part of what we can do as well in the project, is that we can identify the priorities that come up both for restoration and for conservation. And so here, this is an example for Portugal, where this area, I think it's east of Coimbra, comes out as being super valuable for conservation because it's home to endemic and narrow-range species, but it's also fairly degraded, so it also comes up as a priority for 20% restoration. Now that we have these maps, we would really welcome feedback on them. And actually, at the moment, we're opening feedback on a priority check tool, which is just online and basically gives the opportunity for everyone to kind of look at the map, zoom in, and enter comments on these different areas, both in terms of whether they make sense, whether they're potentially feasible or not in terms of implementation. And so if you're interested, I can send you all the details to do that. And we also have another platform, NaturaConnect, where you can just explore and navigate all of the variant scenarios for the different objectives that we're working on. And this will be launched publicly a bit later this year, in a couple of months. And yeah, more generally, there are various ways in which our outputs can be useful, specifically for restoration. So first of all, as I just said, you can take a look at the outputs themselves. You can also apply the framework and methods for spatial prioritization in your context. We have also a learning platform that covers a range on topics like biodiversity models, spatial prioritization, and financing mechanisms. And then also you can access our spatial data, which are already available. A lot of them are already available, will be available in the coming months on Zenodo. So particularly relevant for restoration would be, of course, the priority areas, but also the spatial distributions of species and habitats in current and future scenarios of climate change. Also maps of ecosystem services could be quite relevant, nature positive land use change scenarios. All of those will be publicly or already are publicly available. And so basically you can use our contact details, the project email to reach out, and we can also put you in touch with the relevant people. As I said, we're a large consortium, and this map kind of shows where we are distributed in Europe. But yeah, that's all I had, and thank you for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. Much appreciated. Very, very interesting. And this already connects with the number of questions and comments we have had in the morning session here in terms of the role of protected areas. This appears clean also through the map. So this makes things more concrete. I think the picture is very interesting for development. So we really support and encourage participants to get connected with that application and tools and try to test it and check if it fits. And also with the approach of prioritization, that's essential when we look at the country level and how strategically you need to make the decisions when so many factors came into the game when we speak about restoration. So I think you're raising a number of crucial points and goes deep into the practice. So thanks a lot. And again, I think the NaturaConnect project is producing quite a lot of interesting problems, and it's coming to an end, but you will have access to a number of relevant tools. So please take a look, and we'll share the information and data with the participants. With this, I realize we are a bit late. I don't think we'll have that much time for discussion, but just wanted to raise to give the opportunity to a couple of people to raise their comments or questions. In particular, I've seen Mirte Fong who had a question, so please, you want to take the mic and ask Mirte if you're still there. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm there. I think Sofie already shortly answered the question. So my question was, apart from just measuring the nature goals and the success of nature restoration, is there also attention for meeting recovery of associated ecosystem services? So do you also measure this? Because I think it can be a good opportunity, right, to especially related to the nature for people, nature for culture, nature for society approach, just to connect these three things. Also when looking at at nature restoration and the implementation of these goals.
And thanks, Sofie, for your quick answer. You've been faster than mine. So I see a question from Olena, who's asking, how did you prioritize the different scenarios, factors against each other? Was there a specific logic you followed? Sofie, you want to, Louise, you want to add anything for that?
Yes, sure. So we kind of the 144 scenarios that I mentioned basically are a result of just the full possible combination of varying these different factors with one another. So we literally have one variant for every possible combination. I think that's what you meant, or maybe you can expand a little bit on your question. I hope I answered it.
Olena, if you're still there, feel free to jump in.
So just to give an example, for example, the scenario that focuses more on species and habitats really only focuses on species and habitats and disregards any ecosystem service, versus the scenario that is more nature as society balances species and habitats with benefits from ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, pollination, and so on. So that's just to give an example.
Thank you, Louise. And I see there was a practical question on how to use and access the platform. Can you reply to that?
Yes, I was just typing a reply to this. I'll send the credentials in the comment.
Question.
Yeah, please.
Says, is there a similar study on priorities for marine and coastal ecosystems, especially thinking about the need of fostering synergies in shared marine regions? So I'm not quite sure which presentation this was from.
Maybe for Louise again.
It's a good question. I'm not so well versed in the marine realm, unfortunately, which is my bad. I know that there have been papers on restoration prioritization in the marine realm, just I don't know specifically for Europe, but maybe I could try and get in touch with some colleagues that do planning in the marine realm and maybe get back to you if that helps. But yeah, I know anyway that what I do know is that there are two sister projects to NaturaConnect that focus on marine. I can send the details to the organizers, and maybe we can go from there.
With this, I just would like to remind you that we'll keep the Canva page open, so we can still feel free after the end of the meeting to add information on upload information there. I realize that we are quite late, so I don't think we'll address those right now, but we'll definitely consider them both for tomorrow and for the conclusion of our work. Overall, the ambition we have is to develop some tools to support protected area managers with the implementation of the plans, and also national authorities and agencies to improve the planning, which is still going on. And with this, before concluding, a final point that came up also in the discussions is that restoration shouldn't wait for the plans to be developed and finally approved by the Commission in a couple of years. We need to start restoration already now. So I think it's a very powerful message. And I think the tools that are being developed, some of which we have today, and the experiences from some of the member states who shared their experience today, are very relevant in this direction. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your time, all the speakers for their support and contribution, their presentations, and we'll share the material. Hopefully see you with most of you tomorrow when we'll be speaking about implementation of the plan. Thank you.